Greetings, everyone. This is Chief McPhee from the C4 podcast, where cops, cars, and current events are always topics of discussion. On today's episode number 1, bringing on my good friend, Mr. Joel Mires. Joel is a retired Lansing Police Department detective, highly decorated officer, great investigator. I had the opportunity to work the field with Joel. We're going to talk a little bit about his law enforcement career. Joel's also a veteran of the U.S. Army. We're going to talk about his military career. And he's also an avid triathlete. And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the events that he has planned for his triathlete career. So please welcome retired detective Joel Mires.
Welcome to Chief's C4 podcast, where cops, cars, and current events are the preferred topics of discussion. Kyle McPhee, aka the Chief, is a 30-year veteran detective of the Michigan State Police, an avid hot rod builder and automotive connoisseur, a Native American, and the proud father of 2 sons, both members of the U.S. Army, Michigan National Guard, 125th Infantry Regiment. This podcast is not intended for the weak at heart. Alpha males are always welcome, and honest opinions are always given. Now buckle your seatbelt. You are now entering the no snowflake zone.
And we got sound, we got video. Welcome to the Chief McPhee's C4 podcast, where we have today my good friend and fellow beer drinking buddy on episode 1, Joel Mires. How are you, Joel?
Doing fantastic. Thank you for the opportunity, Kyle.
All right, man. This is what we do. We're just gonna shoot the crap here a little bit, and I got a beer, so I'm gonna drink that. I'm gonna crack that open here.
All right, I got some coffee.
All right, very good. So, Joel, I wanted to touch base with you. I know we normally get together with the other guys and we have our little chief meetings and drink some beers, but we've all been quarantined and doing this whole social distancing thing. So I figured this is the best way to connect with my buddies, and then in the meantime, we can just kind of go over some things, because you and I have been in the same line of work for several years, and I figured we'd just talk about that. And you've had some really good stories about your military career, and you kind of grew up around the area here a little bit, and then you just recently retired. So I kind of wanted to see how that was going, and I figured we just cover that and see how that's going. So why don't you tell everybody about about where you grew up, and if you know where you're from and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I grew up in a small town not too far from Lansing, in Langsburg. It's about 18 miles northeast of Lansing, and I grew up in the law enforcement family. My dad was a police officer and retired from the Lansing Police Department as a lieutenant in 1988. I was serving as a patrol leader in South Korea when my dad retired from the Lansing Police Department.
What was his rank, Joel?
Lieutenant.
He was a lieutenant? Now, how many...
Yep, he was a lieutenant.
How many years did he do with Lansing PD?
He did 22, almost 23 years.
Okay, all right. And Dad has since passed, right?
Yeah, my dad, unfortunately, passed away a year and a half ago. We were very close. He was my mentor as a kid, and basically he inspired me to pursue the career in law enforcement. I loved every aspect about it as a kid. His friends, it was very tight-knit, and that's all I knew. And I looked up to so many people as a kid growing up in that community, or in that family.
What, Joel, I remember we were talking before, but your dad had some kind of connection to Native Americans, or there was a totem pole that I remember. I think it was Todd have that now. What was the connection there with your dad and
He has that.
what is that all about with your dad and the Indians?
So my dad did what do you call it, a genealogy report. It's actually at my mother's house, but we are ancestors of the Cherokee Indians. His mother was quarter Cherokee. The totem pole that Todd has doesn't have anything to do with our ancestry with the Cherokee Indian tribe.
Okay.
There was a gentleman that knew my dad, collected a lot of Indian artifacts, and he actually did presentations at the Langsburg High School, and he gave my dad that. It's actually from a tribe in Alaska.
Wow.
And I can't remember what tribe that is at this right now.
It's really cool, though. Really cool piece. Yeah. Yeah. So you grew up in Langsburg. Did you go to Langsburg High School?
I did. I graduated in 1986.
Okay. And then did you go to college?
Yeah, I joined the Army at 17. I joined the infantry. I was in for 3 years. And when I got out, I joined the National Guard. And I attended Lansing Community College, where I eventually went through the 49th Mid-Michigan Police Academy.
What tell us about your military career. I know you've talked to military, and I've talked to you before about that, and you've been some really good information in assistance to my boys who are in the military, and tell us about your military career, Joel. What branch and what rank and all the places that you got to visit when you're in the military.
So I went in when I was 17. My parents had to sign off to allow me to go in before I was 18. Had my 18th birthday in basic training, which was in Fort Benning, Georgia, where I attended basic training and advanced individual training for the infantry. And I wanted to go to jump school so bad, wanted to go to Ranger school. And then they didn't have all the slots they have now. Every day I'd bug my drill sergeant to go to Ranger school. He said, "We'll see what we can do."
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what we can do. Well, it never happened. And I ended up getting stationed in Fort Campbell, Kentucky. When I got out of basic training, I was an E2. And when I went to Fort Campbell, I was assigned to Bravo Company, 3rd of the 502nd Infantry, where I was a member of a squad, an infantry squad, and basically was a rifleman when I was there. And while I was there, I got to attend air assault school, which is 3 weeks of sling loading operations is the first week. The second week is helicopter nomenclature, identifying the different helicopters, ground guiding helicopters, sling loading helicopters. And the most exciting week was rappel week, where we were going off the towers, rappelling, and doing things including like the Australian style rappel.
Oh boy, front
way,
straight
down. Yep.
Yeah, I've seen our ES team, our emergency support team with MSP, does the Australian as part of their training, and they do it off the top of the training academy out here, and it's pretty. I don't think that's something I could do. I'm not one for heights, so I probably couldn't do that.
It's pretty intense, letting yourself, because you break in the front, so allowing yourself to get at a 45-degree angle. That'd be a 45.
90.
Straight,
Yeah.
90.
Yeah.
Not a mathematician. Yeah. but
we're just cops, Joel.
That's right. And then going down the side of a building. And I guess the purpose of that is because you have your weapon out front. If you have to engage somebody, you're in a fighting position.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So you did how many years in the Army?
3 active, and then I was in the National Guard for 4 years.
Okay, here in Michigan?
Yep, I was in F Company 425, which is a long-range reconnaissance unit. At the time, it was the only one, I think, in the Midwest that was parachutist or airborne qualified. That was later on after I got out of active duty.
What rank did you achieve?
I didn't achieve a very high rank, corporal. I took the promotion test, but when I was stationed in Korea, they offered me E5 sergeant if I re-enlisted. And after doing 17 months on the demilitarized zone, I got a little tired of active duty.
Oh yeah.
I served as a patrol leader, doing reconnaissance patrols and ambush patrols at a very young age. When I was stationed in a place called Camp Greaves, which is about 1.5 miles from North Korea. And I think what happened to me as a young man, 20 years old, having that much responsibility for that long of a time period, honestly, I think I was pretty stressed. And I accomplished a lot. I was proud of what I accomplished. Got a nice letter from Lieutenant Colonel Mitchell Zass getting recommended to go to West Point.
Wow.
And I had to go through an interview process. And then shortly before I was set to ETS, get out of the military, re-enlist and go to West Point, I decided to get out, which, in hindsight, it may have been a mistake. My dad was pretty disappointed. And I think I disappointed my dad.
He wanted you to go to West Point?
Yeah, he wanted me to go to West Point. My dad, my dad was a Marine and talked me out of going into the Marines.
Okay.
He was in Vietnam, served in the 1st Marine 7th Battalion, and saw a lot of action in Vietnam. But he always told me, he said, Joel, you're going to get shitty equipment if you go in the Marines. You're going to be able to go to awesome schools in the Army. So he encouraged me to join the Army. And I think when I made that decision not to go to West Point, he was pretty upset.
Really?
But back then, communication isn't like it is now, Kyle, where he could Skype and we could have a lot of communication. I talked to my parents maybe once a month.
Yeah.
So long and short of it, fast forward, I think I upset some of my command that vouched for me, and I had this nice letter of recommendation from a lieutenant colonel to go to the West Point prep school.
Yeah.
And all I wanted to do was be a cop.
Really? But you were 20 years old then?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, you're just a 20-year-old kid, man. That's and you're in the DMZ, right?
Yeah, right. So my mission, and we did this in the cold months because we were close. We would take what's called deuce and a halves. They're these big trucks.
Yep.
We would load up in a deuce and a half. During the day, we would do reconnaissance patrols, and I was in charge of a place called Dolphin's Head because it's shaped like a dolphin.
Mm-hmm.
The terrain that I was in charge of, there was a hilly area, then it branched down, kind of looked like a dolphin shape. So what we did is during the day, we did reconnaissance patrols to see where we were going to set up our ambush positions. And then at night, we would go out and set up the ambush positions, usually along a rice paddy, where we would have an advantage elevation on the enemy if the North Koreans started coming across.
Sure. So 3 years you did over there. And then what'd you do when you left the Army? You went right into the police academy?
So when I got out of the Army, in order for me to attend the police academy, I had to, at Lansing Community College, get an associate's degree. So I attended Lansing Community College, took criminal justice classes. And then once I had enough credits, I was able to get into the Mid-Michigan Police Academy.
All right. And then we know you and I think, boy, we must have, I don't think we started hanging out until, not too many years ago, but I think our kids went to the same school, right?
Right.
In Potterville, and we were kind of aware of each other. I think our wives kind of probably knew each other better than you and I did then.
Yep.
Right.
Mutual friends.
Yeah.
Came in contact, I think, playing poker or something.
Yeah. And then I had known you as an officer at the Lansing PD, and you had a very distinguished career at Lansing PD.
Thank you.
I don't think I've ever bumped into anyone that said anything negative about Joel Mires as a police officer. So you should be proud of yourself. That was a great career. Let us know, like, you did what, 25? Did you do 25 years?
So I did 6 months in the city of DeWitt when I graduated from the police academy in 91. And then I wanted to get on at the Lansing Police Department so bad. But when I graduated from the police academy in 91, law enforcement jobs were not plentiful. It was extremely competitive. I applied at Lansing. I had to have a bachelor's degree at that time to get in. So I worked city of DeWitt for about 6 months part-time. And then I hired on at the Lansing Township Police Department from 92 to 94. And then my career at the Lansing Police Department was from 1994 until recently last year, 2019.
Wow. Yeah. So you and I started our careers in about the same time. I came in 89. And we probably are absolutely complete opposites when it comes to why we got in the business.
Really?
Yeah, I was basically from the old school of if you can't beat them, join them. I had no aspirations to be law enforcement at all. Growing up in the Upper Peninsula, that just wasn't a thing for me. But I got some direction from dear old dad after college was done and I didn't have a lot going. He kind of gave me choice of maybe you should go in the military or you should take a state civil service exam. And I was kind of an undisciplined kid from the UP that really wasn't into the military thing either. So I chose the civil service exam, not knowing that dear old dad signed me up for the state police civil service exam. I thought I was going to be driving a snowplow for MDOT.
Nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of how I got in the business. And then I found myself standing on the steps of the police academy over here in Dimondale in 1989 on a 90-degree day and not knowing what the hell I was doing. But, here we are 30 years later. But I know you and I kind of had similar careers. We came out of uniform and then we got into the detective bureau and worked a variety of different assignments. Give us kind of your law enforcement LPD wise, what was all your assignments that you were able to work on when you worked for Lansing PD?
So the nice thing about the Lansing Police Department at the time I hired on was we had 265 officers.
Yeah, big department.
Yeah. I mean, and I think now they're down to 210, 215. I still communicate with some of the guys that are still actively employed, but there was a lot of opportunity. To round that off, what I did is you start out as a patrol officer, as a police officer at the Lansing Police Department. And I was there for about 1.5 to 2 years. And I was approached to become a field training officer. And they knew I had previous experience at Lansing Township. A lot of the folks knew me. They knew how I worked. I was reluctant to do that because I was still young. Didn't feel that I had proven myself as a Lansing police officer at that point. Mm-hmm. And I got a little bit of ridicule because eventually I said, well, yeah, sure, I'll do it.
From the older guys?
Oh, yeah, this is bullshit. You're too young. You've been here for, 1.5 I can't believe Mires. You know how it is.
Yep.
Cops are terribly antagonistic when it comes
I was an FTO with 2 years on the job, Joel.
Okay, So got into that right away. My first recruit was squared away and have a lot of respect for him. Matt Crumbaugh still works. His dad was an MSP trooper as well. Mm-hmm. So, and he had worked someplace else. So the transition was pretty easy. So at the same time that was going on, I was contacted by my lieutenant at the time, who was Mark Alley. He says, Joel, I'm going to draft you into a community police job.
Oh, yeah, that was big back then.
Yeah, I mean, back in the mid-'90s.
Yeah, that was big.
Janowitz, Bob Baldwin. I mean, it was huge.
Very effective, in my opinion, too.
Oh, yeah. So I didn't want to do it, but Mark said, well, Joel, if you allow me to draft you, you will only have to do it for 2.5 years instead of 3.
Oh, wow. So there's a little carrot dangling there.
Yeah. So I said, okay. So they assigned me I was Frank 80.
What part of town is that?
That's Baker Street.
Oh, one of the highest crime area in the city.
Yeah, I had the highest crime rate. I can't remember how many homicides there were before I was assigned to that position. I took over for Dave Emmons.
Yeah.
He was a really good training officer. He introduced me to all the people in the community. My right hand lady was Anita Moneypenny, just a fantastic community leader. She guided me through the whole thing.
Yeah.
She was really a godsend for me and helped me out a lot organizing, because I'm not a community flower planting type
Sure.
guy. I wanted to do law enforcement stuff.
Yeah.
So I did that for 2.5 years, made some great contacts. Until the day I retired, I had people come up to me and remembered me and would refer to me as Officer Joel.
Wow. That's great. That's a tough neighborhood, boy.
Yeah, it was tough.
Yeah. How long did it take for you to gain trust from that particular part of town, in your opinion?
So I was pretty hard-nosed, young, go-get-'em type guy. So for me, I had to learn a balance with that, not to have too aggressive of an approach, too law enforcement oriented, where I'm a hard ass.
Yeah.
And eventually that saved me, because there were a couple foot chases I was in where some guys that could be bad dudes actually helped me out.
Yes.
One guy, and I'll go by his nickname, TC. He had his problems, but he actually helped me out a couple times.
Yep. Yeah, that was I worked in Ypsilanti, and that was a very rough town to work in, especially from a kid from the Eastern Upper Peninsula that didn't know nothing about the street. It took me a while to learn, and but we didn't have back then community police officers from the state. A lot of times it would be the city PD or the township PD, and it was tough. They didn't trust, when we came into the neighborhood, they knew that it just meant we were coming in there to take somebody to jail for the most part,
Right.
But we didn't get a lot of that trust like you got as being part of that neighborhood. So you had to kind of play that fine line. That's tough.
And it was a learning experience for me, Kyle, because here I am, a young police officer, and I'm attending community meetings. I'm having to get up and speak in front of people.
Yeah.
I'm dealing with city council. I'm dealing with the mayor's office. I'm in direct contact with my chief when stuff happens. So it was a big responsibility. But quite honestly, the thing that really helped me out a lot were the experiences that I gained in the military.
Really?
To deal with a diverse situation like that.
Really? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I did one time? I figured things were really rough back then, racially, and there was a majority of the troops at our post, I think, were Caucasian or white, and we've had, but some of the high crime areas that I like to work in, I said, you know what, I got to show these people that I'm here to get the bad people out and not mess with the good people. So on a Sunday, it was kind of quiet on a Sunday one day. They have a lot of big churches in the city there. And I just decided, I just walked in one of the churches and sat in the back pew. And initially, everybody thought I was there to arrest somebody. That was kind of the initial, like, what's he doing here? And when they, I just kind of met some people, shook some hands, and said I just wanted to stop in and say hi to everybody, kind of thing. They kind of look at you very suspiciously and said, "Really?" They couldn't believe it,
Mm-hmm.
But I think so. Some of the people, those contacts I made that day, I knew them for a long time after that, and they were really, really good people.
Yeah, and later on as a detective, people remembered me just from the community connection that I had.
Yeah.
And it almost gives you, well, not almost, but it gives you credibility with the community as well.
Yeah. So you did that for 2.5 years?
Yeah, I did that for 2.5 years. And I remained in FTO I worked road patrol altogether for about 15 years. And I think I trained between 60 and 70 officers.
Wow.
Actually,
that's a lot.
Yeah. And it was at times, I was having one recruit after the other. And I worked day shift half the time and then night shift half the time.
Yeah.
And in 1 year, I trained 10 officers, which was way, way too many when we were having a huge influx of hiring.
Yeah.
And we didn't have enough night shift field training officers back in the, God, I want to say like 2005.
Were you doing double duty?
Yeah, I was training, and I do my reports at night or the next day after staying up all night. Sometimes I had court in the morning. You know how it is.
Yeah.
But it was a lot.
Wow. And then where'd you transition to after that?
So, as a Lansing police officer, I also worked as an undercover narcotics detective with our in-house unit, the special operations section.
Yeah.
I did that for 2.5 years. Great experience. Again, we had 8 officers and 3 command, which was a good size unit. And we were able to just have a good time. We got our work done. In 1 year, we did over 100 raids.
Wow.
What I mean by that is we did 100 search warrants, which resulted in raids.
Yes.
And granted, some of them were smoke houses that were problem properties, but then on some of them we got, $75,000 in forfeiture, dope, guns.
Yeah.
I had great informants that I worked with. I worked really close to people where I got introed to dealers that were dealing heroin, cocaine, marijuana. I worked with an ATF agent that I was buying stolen guns from a guy off of Main Street, a pretty bad area on the east side. But you know what? I was so fortunate to have myself surrounded by good people that knew what they were doing. I was just extremely fortunate. And I really, it's like a cliche, but I really owe my career and things like that to them.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly, Joel. It makes such a difference when you have good people, especially that work under you too. When I was a supervisor running a crew, it was, they made it so easy for me sometimes because I had such squared away troops. And, let's talk a little bit about the narcotics world, because you and I both went down that road as well. And, I learned a ton of, just knowledge in street stuff from the older guys that I worked with, and I still use those to this day. Some of the the things that they taught you. But there was times when I was doing, and I didn't do a lot of, back then where I was working, I was assigned to counties that didn't have major, a drug task force. So back then, you had some rural counties up in central Michigan and that kind of thing that weren't covered. So we would go up there and we were doing a lot of marijuana cases, and then we got into mostly powdered cocaine. We didn't get too much into anything other than that. So we're buying 8 balls, doing a lot of 8-ball deals and that kind of thing. But what I got a little frustrated working narcotics because it felt like we were just losing the war. That was you never could seem to make a dent in it. For every pound you took, there was a pound the next day. I'm not advocating that we should legalize anything, but did you feel that frustration when you were in narcotics?
Yeah, I did. So all it felt like I was doing was keeping people's heads down. Yeah. I just felt like I was that maybe possible deterrent.
Yeah.
But like you said, the demand for drugs was so high. Unfortunately now, heroin and pills, it's so bad now. When I was working narcotics, we were mainly doing the crack cocaine trafficking. I didn't see a whole lot of heroin.
Did you I remember in the city, Joel, you guys had a deal with the feds where if you got crack or you got a large amount of drugs and there was weapons involved, that was like what was the name of that deal where the feds would assume the case? Was it an operation, or was that do you remember what I'm talking about? Where they would get,
I can't recall it, but basically if they had a gun and a certain amount of drugs, the feds would take the case.
Yeah. Did that serve as a deterrent on the street at all to people, knowing that?
when it did serve as a deterrent in an interview when you got a Fed next to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And when they knew, I would say yes, when they knew the Feds had the case, people got pretty tight.
Yeah.
They tightened up. I mean, what I mean by that is they were scared.
Yeah. And the Feds always had that great ability to flip people too, offering them, deals and that kind of thing. So yeah, that was really interesting time back in the 90s to be in narcotics. But so you went, how many years did you work narcotics? 3?
Just about 3 years at the Lansing Police Department. It was a 30-month assignment.
Oh, okay.
And I felt that when I left, I was just getting good at it.
That's normally how it is with just about everything. Yeah. We do that in MSP. They like to use the 3-year rule for a lot of special assignments. And when I ran my drug interdiction squad, the guys were really, they didn't get really, really good and feel comfortable till about 2.5 years, and then when they were rolling, it was time to recycle them out, So, but some departments, I think, like in the area here, they even have a rotating detective bureau, right? They would rotate guys back to the road. Did Lansing do that?
No, our detective bureau is you take a test and it's a permanent assignment unless we have 2B detective number 2B and 2C. The 2C is a rotating through basis.
I see. Okay.
So, and I think, and it depends on how many people, how strong we are for staffing on the road as to how many people can go into that.
Okay.
And when I left our detective bureau, I think there were 2 officers that were rotating in for this, what we call 2C spot.
Okay.
Yeah.
You, when you left uniform and went into the DB, did you ever go back to uniform or did you stay in plain clothes the rest of your career?
I stayed in plain clothes the rest of my career unless it was volunteering for overtime to do bike patrol or a special assignment.
Oh, that's
then
good.
Yeah.
That's a good gig. So then you left narcotics, and then where'd you go?
Left narcotics. I had to go back to uniform patrol for 2 years, and I took the detective test during that 2-year time. I was on the road and scored high enough to get promoted to detective, which would have been about 8 years ago. So around 2011, I believe.
And what was your first assignment for what were you in charge of? So
I was in charge of property crimes, which is where I had the investigation with you with the guy that spray painted the Capitol.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we solved it.
And we did.
We did solve that.
Very,
good. That was a big deal downtown, wasn't it?
Oh man, it was a big deal.
Yeah, I forgot about that.
So that's where I started out, and then I was approached by some of the detectives in the Special Victims Unit, and I volunteered to go into the Special Victims Unit, which is where I spent the majority of my career as a detective, working cases where children were victims of abuse, and that was pretty tough. Tough
duty for anybody. But I know some of the cases that you worked, there were some high profile cases, and most people don't stick in that type of work for very long. But I think you were good. You were really good at those cases, Joel. And I think,
thank you.
Yeah, you did some pretty high profile stuff. And I think it's tough to see those kids go through that, man, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I'm going to admit it. I cried on the stand once. And it's going to happen because, children are the most precious things in the world to me.
Right.
And the most innocent. And I don't want to get into too many details, but to see what some people can do to children, it's just really unbelievable.
Isn't that something? I said that to somebody the other day. I said, people understand there's child abuse in the world, but they don't understand how awful children are treated as a whole. They really don't.
Absolutely. And really, after being in that unit, fortunately for me, my kids at the time were older teenagers. most of the vulnerable children I dealt with were, I would say, really under the age of 10 for the most part.
Yeah.
And my team, well, the team, it wasn't my team, but we investigated all the baby deaths in Lansing, no matter
Yes.
if it was an accident or not.
Yeah.
So coupled with that, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of cases, went to autopsies where
Yeah.
children.
And those, we did, my partner and I did a homicide of a 2-month-old, and those are cases, and those are cases that the images of those cases will never leave your mind, and you have to, the old saying comes as I hope, my mind forgets what my eyes have seen, but that's not always the case, is it?
No, it's not. And there's certain things that will trigger that every now and then. For me personally, the way I dealt with it on a healthy, I guess, route was a good friend of ours. You know him.
Oh boy.
Got involved in triathlon training.
He got you hooked.
Got me hooked. And for me, I've been a bit of an adrenaline junkie my whole life. And that was my escape. And I know guys at work were like, Jesus, here he comes again talking about triathlon.
Yeah.
But for me, that was my avenue for my brain to go that way.
Yeah. And
I'll admit, I like my beer too.
Yeah.
But that was my healthy.
I tell Joe, when I teach the recruits around the state, I teach about 40 classes a year around different colleges, and I try to get psychologically trying to get them ready for what they're about to embark on. And that's one of the main things that I tell them is you cannot do a full shift, no matter what your assignment is, of 12 hours, 10 hours, what it is, adrenaline rush, adrenaline dump all night long, go home, turn your car off, and walk in the house and expect things to be normal.
Hi, honey.
You have to find some outlet to decompress, and you have to do that. You have to come up with a routine that allows you to do that, or otherwise you're gonna not have a good home life.
Yeah, otherwise you're gonna be isolated in your basement.
Yes.
Not wanting to have any contact with your family.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Because you're exhausted. You're physically exhausted, mentally exhausted. You don't want to deal with any kind of family issue.
Yeah.
And God bless my wife. I married one of the strongest people I have ever met.
She's a saint.
Oh my God, she's a saint. To put up with me for that amount of time and deal with shift work, mood swings, going out with buddies, having fun, blowing off steam, whatever. Just a saint.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. I'm in the same boat. I know when you're doing that kind of work, conviction rate, is very important. If I remember right, you had a pretty high conviction rate doing those cases. Am I right?
Yeah, I did. I was assigned hundreds of cases a year, which was way too many for one person. Law enforcement throughout the country is saying it. So when you say conviction rate, I guess if you put that into perspective, most of the cases that I submitted were solid because the prosecutor wasn't going to issue something that wasn't, I guess.
Sure.
But when it came to going to court, I was happy to see that my conviction rate was pretty good. Yes.
And there's a lot of satisfaction in that, knowing that you saved, you protected some children and maybe got them into a better environment too. I think there's a lot of self-satisfaction too, isn't there?
Yes, there is. That is one of the most rewarding jobs because you pour so much into it.
Yeah.
And I tell people the most important job at that police department or any police department are detectives or officers that are representing those that are vulnerable, like children.
Yeah.
And you got to have, not just because I was in it, but you got to have people in it that know what they're doing. Yeah.
Yep. Right. They've got to be, you got to have that compassion. You got to be able to turn off the hardcore detective and have some compassion with those kind of cases. And I tell you, some of those cases of the ones, those are, for me, those were the emotions involved with those cases from beginning to end. You were really spent at the end of those cases, weren't you?
Oh yeah. You were spent at the end of the case. You were spent during the case, whether I'm having dinner at a local restaurant, and Child Protective Services calls me and say, hey, you're getting this one tomorrow. And I'll say, no, we're getting that one now. I'm coming in.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me at the Lansing Police Department, I had great command. I had a great captain, worked with some great troopers too, great detectives. We had that flexibility.
Yeah.
If I needed to come in, they knew it was,
and that's
important.
It's all about who you work for in this business,
Oh, yeah.
It's huge. It really is. And so how many years did you work the kid cases?
Well, while working the kid cases, I was assigned to MSP Computer Crimes Unit.
I remember that.
ICAC. I can get more into that too in a minute if you want. But altogether, the kid cases, 3 years.
Yeah.
And I had enough.
Yeah, that's a lot. And that's the number of cases that you were working is absolutely unbelievable.
Crazy.
We would never, in our agency, would never get that kind of a caseload on one person like that. That's just insane. How many would you say you worked a year?
So just to put it into perspective, it could be a child abuse case causing death, first-degree child abuse, homicide case, all the way down to a CPS referral where somebody's kid that's 3 is walking around a neighborhood unsupervised. So a lot of them I didn't investigate. So in 1 year, I want to say I had about 220.
Wow.
But a lot of them were DPFI dropped.
Yeah.
But I guess the long and short of it, and this is just a very rough estimate, I would say ones that were pretty involved, maybe 40, and then some that were a little bit quicker, maybe another 40, and then some that didn't really require a whole lot of follow-up, maybe a couple interviews and a warrant packet, let's say maybe additional 40 to 50. So I'd say somewhere around 120 to 130 cases in a year.
That's insane, man. That's a lot of case supervision. Holy cow.
Yeah. And basically for us, the detectives were supervisors. The sergeants assigned the cases. They were there during a major event. If it's a homicide or something, or it could be homicide. But really, they assigned us our cases. Yeah, we'd go in and gripe about maybe getting too many, or maybe we just had a big one. We didn't want it. But we were our own supervisors.
Wow. Dang. So you went from that into the computer crimes, right?
Yeah, I was
in the content. The content didn't get much better there.
No, to say the least. So he recently passed away. Detective Ron Seka was fantastic. He was a super guy. God rest his soul. But he approached me because they were having another opening for someone that was going to be a forensic examiner. So I'm thinking, I don't know. And they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I said, yeah, I'll give it a shot. So it was basically an assignment set up for IASIS, which is a special school. It's almost like getting a special degree in computer forensics.
Yeah,
it is a special degree. And the school would have took a year or so for me to get through. So I got over there. I was assigned to investigate child pornography.
Oh, jeez.
And I had 2 cases go federal, where I worked with a marshal on these 2 cases, federal marshal, where they caught a guy from Lansing that had a whole bunch of pornography on his phone, just egregious stuff. Don't need to get into it. They were videos. And a lot of these cases were already out on the internet. What I mean by that are the photographs. They're already identified as child pornography.
Yeah.
But he had hundreds and hundreds of these on his phone. So I had to download them onto Cellbrite and Lantern, which are software programs. I was supervised by civilians up there and MSP sergeants. Make a long story short, I submitted a couple cases. They went federal. There were convictions. But you know what? Sitting there day after day looking at that stuff, I finally went to Lieutenant Poupard, Jay Poupard, and I says, I appreciate you giving me this opportunity. I learned so much, but it's not for me.
Yeah. Yeah, that is. I don't know how some guys have been up there for years, and I don't know how they do it.
So they we had a psychologist that would talk to us every once in a while, which was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Did a great job. But yeah, I mean, it's just wasn't for me.
Yeah, I was never big on those cases myself. I never really had. We had our own unit that did that, so I never got into those too much. But yeah, that's tough duty too, man. That's I don't even know some of the stuff that I've seen come up on those CSAM cases is, the only thing, Joel, that I used to be able to do when I'd see stuff like that and see the perverse behavior that society does in the underbelly of the world that we see. You can go home at night and eat dinner with your family and just look at them and say, you know what? We're normal.
Exactly.
You really
yeah.
It was so crazy, some of the stuff that we saw. But so you left the computer crimes and then you went back to the DB?
Yeah, I went back to the DB, and it was a shared assignment. So I'd go over to MSP a couple times a week. Ended up going back to Lansing full time, and then I continued to work child crimes for an additional 2 years.
Yeah,
where I was doing that solely. And then at the end of my career, I ended up doing the fraud investigations.
Oh, that's right. That's right. I remember you doing fraud.
Boring, complex,
yes,
long. I mean, I'd have paperwork that was, so high. Last case I had, one of the other detectives took it over. It was a pretty big case, and it's been in the paper. I can mention it. But a lady embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from Neogen. And it was so complex that she went through one attorney who we know. He says, I don't understand this shit.
The attorney said that?
Yeah. So that's what I was told.
Yeah.
From one of the detectives now.
Yeah.
So she has a new attorney, and I think that case is still going on.
Jeez. Yeah. Those can get rid. There's some rabbit holes you can get down with those things, man.
Yeah.
Financial crimes too. We're doing a lot of financial stuff now with my crew that I'm on, and actually a racketeering kind of investigation. And they just seem to, every time you talk to somebody, something else branches off, and there just seems to be no end sometimes, But
yeah, and then you've got follow up. The prosecutor wants.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good. I mean, they want an airtight case.
Yeah.
You're doing more and more legwork. One of the employees that assisted me with that investigation, there were two of them. They worked full time getting the paperwork together for 6 months.
Wow.
That was their job.
Just getting records.
Putting it together, showing the trail, all that stuff. Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah. That's pretty common for those kind of cases though,
For sure.
Yeah. And then is that the last assignment that you had?
Yes.
Yeah. And then when did you retire now? How long has it been since you came to the other side?
1 year exactly. Really? Yeah.
It's been 1 year?
Exactly 1 year, yeah.
So give me your assessment of year one of retirement. What'd you expect, and is there anything that you didn't?
So fortunately
did you get bored?
It's different, quite honestly. So I'm still engaged in the triathlon training since the coronavirus.
Yeah.
I'm scheduled to do a half Ironman race in Maryland in June.
Jeez.
So yeah, I did one half Iron distance, Michigan Titanium, 2 years ago. So I geared my activity towards that when I retired. Stayed in communication with some of the guys that are actively employed. I love that.
Yeah.
It makes it easier. And then I'm working. I opened up my own business.
Yep.
And I'm an independent contractor investigator for a gentleman that flies me all over the United States. And I inspect and do investigations of his properties.
Nice. Yeah, that's a good gig, man.
I love it.
So, some of the guys that have gone, like I got, 150 days left before I get put out to pasture. And some of the guys that have been out said, like you said, you won't miss the circus, but you'll miss some of the clowns.
Absolutely.
Right?
I do miss some of the clowns. and I got to see a lot of them before all this started, the coronavirus. When
Yeah.
we could actually get together.
Yeah.
For a retirement party, and the clowns just keep on clowning. So
yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and then I'm sure you and I are going to hang out a little more. And you know, I can't promise you that I'm not going to do any triathlons anytime soon, Joel. You know,
I hear you like biking though.
Oh boy, no, you got to remember, I'm a Clydesdale, not a thoroughbred.
They have a Clydesdale division.
Yeah, so Todd's legendary. You know, he's got the ability to really talk people into things, right? So Todd Stanton is one of our close friends, and he's kind of like a brother to us, and he's a triathlete, superior, you know, athletic guy, and he wanted to take me on a bike ride. And I have a normal mountain bike. I don't have one of these road racers like you guys use, right? And so I explained to him, I'm like, let's just go get the heart rate up a little bit. You know, I can probably go 5-10 miles and I'll be good. And so 13 miles into it, I'm on the side of the road telling him, I don't think I can make it back, bud. And he said, well, let's keep going. So we kept going a little further, and we hit a party store, and he brought me out some of those Gatorade gel packs or whatever they are, right?
Oh, yeah.
Threw some of those down the throat, headed back, and I don't know, I think it was 19 miles after it was all said and done. And he whipped my ass, and I wasn't good for a couple days after that. And I don't know that I'll ever do that again, but we'll do something. I promise. We'll get together and do something.
That sounds fantastic. I appreciate the opportunity coming on your podcast.
Yeah. We'll do this, and we'll get the other guys on here too, and then you know, we'll get everybody together talking all kinds of stories. But what do you think about just trying to finishing us up here? We got a few more minutes to go. This whole COVID-19 thing has hit the world by storm. I didn't see it coming. But now that I look into it, I think just by nature, you know, I'm suspicious, obviously, from what we do. I don't think this was something that came from some animal by accident, Joel. I believe that China sent that over here. To me, I think our economy was rolling. I think maybe they're upset with the whole tariff thing, and they wanted to slow down the locomotive per se, and they sure the hell did that.
Yeah, they did. And when you look at the timing of all of it, the sanctions the president put on them,
yeah,
the effect it was having, the fact that China wants to, they want their currency to rule the world economy.
Yeah.
You know, you would like to think, though, that, I mean, they're affecting the whole world, and quite honestly,
themselves to some extent as well.
Yes. Yeah. So for us to think that it came out of a lab, I mean, there's different opinions about that. There's some documentation that it could have happened by some statements they made early on. But doggone, I hope that that's not the case. And quite honestly, when this is said and done, they're gonna have some reparations to make to the world.
Yeah. I was really excited because I got, like I said, my retirement's coming, and my 401 was hitting on all cylinders, and I was really looking forward to it. And I quit looking at it now. I don't even. Yeah. And the thing is, I should, it'll come back. I think when we get a handle on this thing, I think this economy is going to come roaring back like a bigger freight train than it was, and it's just going to take some time.
Yeah, it's going to take some time. But one thing I can tell you is I've always had government jobs until I retired, and I got out in the private sector. And it was scary at first, good learning experience. But I deal with that sector. I deal with business people on all different levels. And I don't really know if people that work for the government, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, but they really understand the effect that shutting down our economy is going to have. Yeah,
it's really tough, man. The unemployment numbers are scary, for people that are out of work. And I'm fortunate that my wife and I both work for the government here in Michigan, but it's sad to see some people lose everything that they've built up, you know?
Oh yeah, for sure. And then, and along with that, depression, there comes other family problems
Yeah.
that right along the coattails of
Yeah.
depression, losing your job, and
Yeah.
more contact with law enforcement, unfortunately, will come
Yeah.
to domestics. Child
Yeah. And
abuse.
this, you know, this isolation and quarantine thing is tough on people that are very social. You know, I mean, that's,
Yeah, me especially.
yeah, it's very tough. It's psychologically very tough on people. You know, I'm one that, you know, I can go either way. I'm not a big social butterfly, you know, for the most part. And, so, you know, I'm all right. I can spend hours out in the garage by myself doing stuff, and you know, it doesn't matter. But, for certain personalities, this is tough.
It is, for elderly people
Yeah.
that have contact with their family members a lot. I feel really bad for my in-laws. They're very, very close to us. I mean, they just live down the street. We hardly ever see them right now because
I
of
know.
social distancing, and because they're one of the vulnerable
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
It's just a terrible thing to go through, and I hope, if anything, that the United States has learned some things. Don't be dependent on foreign nations for our medical supplies
Yeah.
and our medication. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a national security issue.
It'd be nice to get all that stuff back in the country. You know, it really would. I've always been, you know, somewhat of a conspiracy theorist, I guess, but I don't trust some of the food we're eating. I think sometimes our food's killing us, you know. But it'd be nice to get some of that back in the country, you know, like you said.
We will.
But I'm thinking, you know, and I tell people a lot, I said, let's just kind of look at this as a small sliver of time in everybody's life. And maybe a year from now, we're going to look back on this and go, holy shit, you know, this was, that was crazy. And maybe we'll be past it by then, but we can only hope, my friend.
Yes, we can. We can hope. We can pray that our leaders are making good choices.
Yeah, I would. Hey, how, you know, the leaders, speaking of them, you know, I'm watching the news, and boy, they look tired. It's got to be taxing. They look really tired.
Yeah, it's funny because Jody, my wife, asked me. She said, and we watched the briefings. Quite honestly, they're getting a little monotonous, which is a good thing.
Yeah,
there isn't a lot of big news.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is bad right now. But looking at him, Jody says, "Is the president on every day?" I said, "Yeah, he is."
Yeah.
Every day.
He's looking rough. He's looking tired.
Yeah, and he's getting it from all sides, whether you like him or not. You know.
Yeah. Who you step up? You know, who else is going to step up? But he seems to be, you know, he's getting a little testy. But who wouldn't?
Right.
You know,
right. He's getting a little testy with the media. And but you know, I was listening to the questions. Maybe you think this too. Maybe it's because we were police officers and we know how to ask questions.
Yeah, I agree with you.
These questions that these reporters are asking, it's like, what the hell?
Yes.
You know, I mean, how about asking, okay, at what point when this curve flattens, at what point during the flattening of the curve are we going to get back to work?
Right. Yeah.
I mean,
that's
a pretty good, and I really haven't heard that.
It's almost like they're trying to play stump the chump with him a lot of times, and trying to get some kind of a sound bite that they can clip, you know, or it's just never, doesn't seem like it's like their questions has anything to do with anything sometimes, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Mr. President, have you considered at some point approaching China about the cost that was accrued, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, it sounds like we're having a hell of a thunderstorm outside right now.
Yeah, we are.
So we probably ought to call it before our internet gets knocked out. So, Joel, I appreciate you coming on, buddy. I appreciate you joining me tonight.
Thank you for the opportunity, Kyle.
All right. Anytime. Let's get together as soon as we can. Stay in touch.
Good, buddy.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.